before we kick off, I'd like to ask each of the panelists just to introduce themselves very quickly and also provide a quick answer to the following question. Gordon Fraser from Microsoft, the CEO in the UK, said last week, "I cannot guarantee that EU-based data will not leave Europe, and nor could any other company." So could you just give your response to that and whether you would also echo those sentiments? So we start at this end. So Graham.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Graham Collinson, representing In Technology, the sales director. I'm glad you asked me that question first. It was totally unprompted, but thank you for that. I think it's a really interesting discussion. I think during the conversations we've had today and in previous cloud events, there's been a lot of conversation about data, access to data, security of data. If that's a statement that they've made, quite clearly it is, then I think that's a very honest statement that, my initial reaction would be, I kind of concur with that. However, there is, certainly from our point of view, a real desire to ensure in the way that we do business that that is not the case, and certainly the verticals that we operate within, we've got very stringent rules that we have to adhere to. So that's my honest answer.
Thank you.
Hello, pardon me. My name's Perry Ward. I'm a product architect from SunGard, so I'm a technical person. My response to that question, gosh, I think it is one of those questions that is designed to get everybody worked up and hot under the collar about something that may or may not be an issue and may or may not be a worry. I tend to look at things comparatively. Yes, we've got our lawyers looking into it. We're trying to understand what the implications would be. But I would be far more worried in the current world about internal employees and how they're accessing data within my environment. And I'd be far, far more worried about hacking. We've got an enormous number of hacking stories in the news at the moment from the newspapers. I think I would be far more worried about malicious access to my data than I would about whether or not we're going to have a legal bun fight with the US Patriot Act. So I think it's something we need to be aware of, but I don't think it's something that we should be putting as number one on our radar as the most important thing to worry about data access in a shared environment.
Okay, thanks, Perry.
Hi, I'm Doug Clark. I'm the cloud leader for IBM in the UK and Ireland. I think it really depends on the particular requirement that the client has as to how you handle that client's data and where you put it. So, if your solution, and I mean the entire solution, not just the technology, the network and all of that, but all of the services that wrap around it, including the entire partner ecosystem, including the network providers or whoever else it might be, if the rules of engagement are that the data doesn't go somewhere else, it doesn't go somewhere else. That's the rules, that's what you've signed up to do, and that's essentially what they get, fit for purpose.
Thomas Davis, I run Google Apps business here in the UK. A very interesting question. The way that we see this is the following. It's actually quite simple. The Local Data Protection Act in the UK really makes you have a very black and white look at data protection where your data actually needs to lie. It needs to sit within the EEA, so the 41, I think it's 41 or 44 member states, or in the US. In the US, if it is in the US, it has to be under what's called US-EU Safe Harbor. So there isn't really any grey. The data has to sit in one of those two jurisdictions, and if you can do that, then you're compliant with UK DPA. That doesn't mean that there may be specific industry or regulatory requirements per customer. So the key thing is do your due diligence and actually take a look at your own requirements and then work with your technology partner to make sure that their footprint actually matches your requirement.
Simon May, I'm a cloud evangelist for Microsoft. And actually I'd echo the comments there. Just understand your data, know what is in that data and know what needs to be where. Go through it, stratify it. If it needs to be kept within the UK and you can't allow it into a cloud service where it's going to go cross-border, then understand that and keep it in the UK. Not overly difficult once you understand your data and you build your services into a hybrid fashion. I think the other thing as well around this whole confusion at the moment about the Patriot Act and what that can do and where that can go. absolutely anybody, any company with a US presence is going to be subject to the Patriot Act. That includes Microsoft, it includes everybody else that's in this space. Will that actually affect you? Well, are you doing something illegal with the data that you're storing there? That's a question that you need to think about. Do you actually think that the US government is going to take legal action against you, if that's what you're worried about, unless there is real grounds for it? Is the fact that they can ask somebody, and if they ask Microsoft for it, we will redirect them to you, unless we are told not to. If that happens, then you're going to have exactly the same response as if they came knocking on your door anyway. So I think you have to think about this in the context of the wider picture around data security and around access to your data.
Okay, very good. Thank you, panelists. So any questions from the floor? At the back there, could we...
Hi, Kevin Quinn from Simply Health. We obviously deal with quite a lot of medical data. And I think possibly getting tied up on the Patriot Act in America is a bit of a red herring when it comes to DPA. It's where it can be accessed and possibly stolen from other places around the world. And I think for governed companies such as ourselves, then the regulations that are coming out are getting tighter and tighter. And I think that's going to continue to grow over the years. So I think that's something that the cloud in general is going to have to be able to respond to. And it's not just where the data sits, but who within your organisation can access it to support the data as well.
Okay. Did you have a question as well? Or?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so one of the things I found is that when I was originally looking at this, people didn't really know within their own organisations rules around the DPA, such as if it's being supported by database administrators but sat in Indonesia somewhere, but accessing data centre in the UK, they would still be a data processor.
Okay, anyone?
Do you know where your data is and within your own companies, who's actually accessing it?
Yep, Perry?
I think what you've touched on is a point that I've banged on about at various of my events, which is good technical architecture and good design and good awareness of what you do doesn't go away with the cloud. And I think we're all a little bit wowed by the cloud at the moment. We're in that sort of honeymoon period where we're going, oh, it's going to bring us all these benefits. And certainly as a technical architect myself, I get really frustrated about the fact that we need to bring probably better architecture and design to the cloud, not offload it. At lunch, somebody was saying to me the whole concept of it's somebody else's problem. Putting something in the cloud doesn't make it somebody else's problem. Data access rights don't become your cloud provider's problem. All you're doing is virtualizing the data center effectively. So what I'd say in response to your question about where do you know where your data is, and I'd touch on something Simon, said from Microsoft, is that stratification and understanding, and we're going to need that more in the cloud, not less. We're going to have a better understanding of what our data is and where it belongs and who can see it, not just forget about it because somebody else looks after it for us.
Okay, any other questions?
My name is Peter Federico. I work for BMI, British Midland. I want to ask a question. Given that one of the topics that came up was about commoditized services and moving those into the cloud, if you start to take that the next area, you start to think that actually what then it becomes about, if you have commoditized services in the cloud, it's about the service bundling around that from a user perspective or customer perspective. I wonder if, certainly there are three big operators amongst you in terms of technology, and a number of you that participate in that. How much work is going on common user environments or common user platforms so that, in effect, as users of the cloud, we have choice to be able to move from one to the other? Because at the moment, we seem to be going back to the 1970s where everything is proprietary and you want to lock me in, when the whole purpose behind the cloud is flexibility and agility. It's almost counterintuitive to the message.
From an IBM point of view, we are only advocating open standard architectures. So the idea being that you can pick and mix, you could in principle swap from one app vendor to another app vendor. during the life cycle of a project or whatever the workloads might be. And that's basically it. And with the business partners we work with the ISVs we work with, that's really one of the rules of engagement is open standards. And, you know, that's the name of the game. We don't want to be locked into any proprietary stuff because it's a drug addiction. It's a short-term high, it's a medium-term dependency, and it's a long-term misery if you're not careful. And we don't want that for any of our clients.
I'll answer that as well. I think it's a really good question. I think if you think about, you know, the benefits of subscription licensing, that's fantastic. You know, you pay for only what you use. I'd echo, there's no point having a system that actually you're locked in for a number of years. I think from a Google perspective, Larry and Sergey, Eric Schmidt, chairman and the two founders, across the entire company, so not just with an enterprise, take a great focus on a company's ability to use an application, but also not to use that application at their will. So there's actually a cross-company group called the Data Liberation Engineering Team within Google, whose job it is that as any application comes through engineering into product management, it gets vetted by this team of people, and it has to pass those regulations in terms of information needs to be able to get in and out in an open format as quickly and as easily as possible, and we will support you to do that. So it's incredibly important. I think there's a presentation this morning, it was one of the top 3 things that came up: security, network latency, but also lock-in. So we're big advocates of giving people that choice to come on off platform as they feel free to.
Yeah, Graham.
Again, I echo my colleagues to the right. I think there is a real discussion to be had, and I don't have the answer to this, in terms of how cloud providers start to collaborate with each other. So we have a number of cloud providers on the stage today, each looking at arguably different target markets. At some stage, to giving you the openness and the freedom to move between cloud providers, it's how we as cloud providers collaborate together. And I'd be very interested if anyone wants to come back on that. I certainly think that's got to happen to some degree. I'm not sure what the answer is, as I say, but it's got to happen to some degree to give true openness and ability for organisations such as BMI to move around at will, and use that term lightly, but at will. Then there's got to be somewhere where cloud providers do collaborate, and at the moment, maybe we're at the beginning of that journey. Is an observation.
Okay, thank you. Just to echo some of the points there, I think things have moved along a long way since 12 months ago when we were all here. I think the amount of openness around standards is clearly improving, and I think there's a lot more emphasis on those open standards. I think if you take the levels of the cloud, at infrastructure, I think we're fairly well advanced. I think a platform, we're kind of getting there. There are some standards starting to emerge around identity management, security, the way that you structure data and things like that. I think the area where there really aren't any standards, and I'm not sure there will be for a long time to come, is around software and software as a service. Partly because it's tough, because different software has different functionality, different design, and so to move rapidly from one to another software provider is going to be difficult. And maybe some standards will start to emerge in that space, but if anything, that's quite a long way behind the other areas.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
So if I look back at standards over the years, what's usually happened is somebody has differentiated themselves by coming out with something that's proprietary and then push that towards a standardized base environment. And sometimes those standards make everything more open, and sometimes those standards drive everything towards the lowest common denominator. And whilst I think that there is a benefit for businesses out there to have a standard that you can adhere to, I actually think that you also want us to, you should be driving us to have differentiators as well. Because if we become all absolutely open, absolutely no difference between one or another provider, at a moment's notice you could hop from A to B to C, that is not definitely, but that is potentially going to drive a lowest common denominator where you don't get the absolute benefit. I think that the key is in integration between companies. I don't think in this cloud sphere, can I use that word? I don't think we're going to have one provider. We don't want one provider. We want multiple providers, and it will be the integration where the standards will be of value, i.e. being able to take a service from SunGard, a service from IBM, a service from Microsoft, and integrate those 3 services to build your business ecosystem. I am an advocate of standards as far as they improve ease of technology. I'm not an advocate of standards when they drive everything to the simplest, least functional level, because I think you lose something there. So I think we should be doing both.
Okay.
Being as we write some proprietary software. I think there's an interesting thing here about being able to connect cloud services together, as we've already discussed. One of the key things is that actually most of the cloud stuff that you go out and look at can be used together. The reason for that is actually it's a lot of proprietary services bolted together with APIs that make things available. So if you're creating an application and you want to use some storage from Amazon and you want to use some compute from Windows Azure, fine, go for it. There's an SDK for it. Easy enough to do. It's not a difficult thing to go and mix and match those parts of services that you want to go and do that with. Platform as a service is just that. You can just go and pick up the bits you want. I think the very difficult conversation comes into software as a service, because that by its nature is a lot of very custom stuff, because we've all, with our cloud infrastructures, built that in a way that allows us to run at massive scale. And therefore you get the advantages of the fact that that massive scale reduces the cost a lot. Bringing your data in and out is something you do need to think about. And there are established ways of being able to do that. One of the things that we do when you sign up for a contract with Microsoft is we actually raise that flag for you as part of the contract, so that you need to be thinking about how you're going to get your data out if you want to leave. I think that's a good upfront thing to do. I think it'd be interesting to see more vendors doing that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. The next question.
Hi, Chris Wade from Imagination. I'm really quite curious now that data is very available in terms of space and the ability to move files in and out, etc., with the idea of governance and content management. I think for me it's quite a risky area as to how that's actually dealt with. And obviously it's on a case-by-case basis, but there's going to be a vast sum of data that's going into the cloud, and I'm curious as to what each of you his opinion is on governance.
Anyone like to take that?
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, my opinion on governance is that you need to do it. It sounds silly, but you know, we said it earlier. You need to be doing it. It's not up to getting somebody to. You shouldn't. I don't think it's a good idea to outsource governance to somebody, unless you're outsourcing that governance to somebody who's running a community cloud. So, for example, if lots of pharmaceutical companies get together and they want to run a pharmaceutical cloud, and then somebody's going to do the governance for them, great idea, because they've got a specialty and they can probably do it better than the individuals that individual organisations can do themselves. However, if you go to a public cloud provider and ask them to manage your data and look after your data, they don't have the level of data intelligence that you do locally to be able to do all of that clever stuff with your data, to be able to go through and segregate it and understand exactly what it is and what it means and how important it is to you. So that's one of the reasons why things like data backups are more challenging for public cloud providers. Does that help a little bit?
It does. I mean, if we looked at some of the examples earlier of the different types of cloud, we were talking about public, private, hybrid, and there's a fourth one I can't recall. And so there's a lot of intersection between organization holding information internally and then maybe putting it out to third-party supplier that might want to do something to that information and then maybe storing it somewhere else. And I think, yes, I agree, you have to take care of governance yourself. It's your information, so you know, you're responsible for it. But I'd be curious as to what you think is on the horizon, what methods, all those sorts of things, I suppose.
I think I want to speak for InTechnology's point of view, it depends on the vertical. So somebody mentioned earlier on to me about NHS and access to patient records, etc., which is an emotive subject. Pick your cloud provider, have a look at who is specialised in what. Certainly from our point of view, it's a specialist area for us. So we're N3 accredited, we have to go through IGSOC approval, as do our customers that we contract with, and we spent a hell of a lot of time and effort internally to do that. So, and I know across different verticals, there are lots of different accreditations that, one, the end user clients have to adhere to. And secondly, and from our point of view, very importantly, the likes of the cloud service providers have to adhere to as well. So I would say, understand that, shop around and look at who are the specialists, because there will be specialists on this table here, or this stage here, across different verticals. So just have a look around, that's my view.
Okay. Could we pass the microphone? Okay. Yeah, first, and then we'll come to you next.
Someone put up a slide that showed a sort of Gartner curve of cloud computing being poised at the top of inflated expectations, staring into the abyss of the trough of despair. What inflated expectations do you think are out there, and how are they going to get managed?
Perry?
I take that one because it's something that we talk to our customers about. I think there's an inflated expectation that the cloud fixes every single resilience and disaster recovery problem. And I'm not just saying that because I'm SunGard. But I think there is this belief that if it goes into the cloud, then I've solved every resilience problem that I have. I've solved all of my multi-site requirements. I think there is a belief out there that because it's built around enterprise architecture, they've also done all the other work for you. And if we look at some of the examples of clouds out there, we look at clouds that are being built with the ability to have multi-zone failure and things like that. But I think that that's a question that people aren't asking. And I think that is one of, what did you call it, the inflated expectations, is that we have customers of ours who have very strict compliance requirements in terms of resilience and in terms of disaster recovery and what-if scenarios. And they're looking to the cloud to solve it for them, but not by saying, how do we architect into the cloud to solve it, but by saying, oh, it's okay, we've got it in a cloud provider, as if that solved the problem. So I think that's one of the expectations that we're finding out there.
As I sort of indicated on my presentation, I think cloud's a double-edged sword in many ways. So for those of us in the room who've implemented ERP systems and not actually leveraged the benefit of that because all you did was put in a new system against old business processes and inefficiencies of that. If you didn't have the bravery to do that, then I'd tread really carefully when you're implementing a cloud-based infrastructure, because cloud, by its very nature, is going to accelerate. It basically takes the flywheel off of the engine and makes it more of a sporty engine. Put your foot on the throttle, you go faster. Take your foot off, and it really starts to stall. I think you've got to have the right ingenuity around your commercial engineering, for example, around some of the collaborations or co-opetitions or frenemy engagements you're going to have. You have to have all of that structured. You have to know how far you can go, what you can do with clients that makes things interesting. For example, a client becoming a managed service provider, perhaps for the first time, helping educate them into that equation. There's a whole stack of commercial and business challenges here, not just technical challenges. And I think in terms of hype, from my point of view, the only downside of the sheer amount of noise in the market, and there's a lot of noise, and there's a lot of people coming at cloud from slightly different angles, whether it's public cloud or software as a service or infrastructure as a service. Everybody's coming at it from a slightly different spin. It takes a wee while sometimes to bring the client back down to a level where you can have that dialogue, because they've already got a view on it. They may already think they're doing it because they've done some virtualization, for example. And I think that's probably the crappiest bit of the job, is just getting to what actually is your knowledge of cloud and where are you coming from, what are you trying to do, basically.
Jeremy, glad you made it.
Hi, yes, thanks, Andrew. Sorry to be late. Obviously, one of the disappointing things about cloud is that it hasn't managed to resolve London traffic yet. So there's a bit of despair about that. But in all seriousness, I missed the start of this, so just very quickly by way of introduction, I'm head of online services. My name is Jeremy Neal. I'm head of online services at IM Group. We're a systems integrator, so we take a sort of semi-neutral view of this, and we're focused on building solutions for our clients. So I suppose expectations and despair are based on what it is you think cloud can do for you. I have a personal degree of despair around where we're at with cloud in terms of the level of penetration and the level of take-up of it. And I think that's to a degree because as an industry we've not done a particularly good job of connecting cloud with what your needs are, what the day-to-day needs are of your organisations. I think we have the opportunity to do that, and I hope that by being here and hearing some of the real-world stories that have been presented this morning and that will come this afternoon, you will get that. But I think it is very much about your perception of what cloud can be to your business. And from my point of view, what we're talking about here is an extension of the choice that you have in market. It is, I think, all too often presented as a black and white. It's presented as an alternative. It's presented as some kind of future by which, by implication, everything that you've done in the past and up to the present is, should we say, no longer fit for purpose. I don't subscribe to that at all. I think that what we're looking at here is a pragmatic extension of the systems that you already have, where, certainly in our view, we're looking at a hybrid. So you can have some of the cloud that is right for you, and some more of the cloud that is right for you when it is right for you. So we take that kind of fairly feet on the ground view of the cloud, and I think I would view it from that point of view and encourage you to do the same. I think the hype and the white noise, if I can sort of describe it as such, is part of the problem. I mean, I talk to people and people are getting so much information, so many emails, I say emails, information, they're getting so many emails and so much in their inboxes that it's hard to differentiate around, you know, what actually is relevant. So I think being here today, I hope will connect the dots for you in that respect. Learn from what is actually happening in the market and get the real use cases. That for me is the best way of setting the expectations, and then whether or not we have a trough of despair ought to be based on having some realistic expectations in the first place.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. I'll just add two examples, real client examples. One who's just hit the peak of, you know, being really pleased, and one who's just hit the trough of despair. First of all, the good story. A client of ours has got 48 subsidiaries spread around the world, and had spent 3 years trying to put in a common HR system across all those subsidiaries, and it failed. Spent millions and millions of pounds and failed. Went out to tender again, said, all right, we're going to try again, we've got to do this, and got back some bids for an on-premise solution, 2 years worth of work, millions and millions of dollars, and then from a SaaS provider, which was a 6-month project. And I'm pleased to say, now been through all that, have got the HR system rolled out across all 43 units and works really well. And, you know, was done in a fraction of the time, a fraction of the cost that the old way of doing things was. So I think that's an example where it can work. Now, the reason that worked was because the HR function got completely behind it and was prepared to make some really tough decisions to standardize the way they do things and not get derailed by all sorts of different requirements for Chile or for Malaysia or wherever. And so it was a successful project. So a lot of the disciplines that have always been there for IT projects absolutely still apply. But if you get those in place, then absolutely there's some really good benefits to go for. The despair example, a client of ours, again, who had gone out without our help, I hasten to add, and had implemented a CRM system, software as a service CRM system. And they got some benefit from it. In fact, it was completely outside the IT function's control. It was done by the sales function on their own. They, as I say, got some benefit from it, but then after a month or two, they found out that the data in their CRM system was starting to get out of date. You know, they didn't have up-to-date sales information about what had actually been sold, you know, on their SAP system back at base. And so the data the sales guys had when they went to visit their clients was getting more and more out of date. And so they gradually started to dawn on them, actually, you know, this is going to get worse if we don't address it. So they came back to the IT function and said, what do we do? And that's when they realized, actually, we've got to make sure this is integrated properly into all of our other systems. We've got to have ways to make sure the master data, so customer, employee data, and so on, is all maintained and aligned, and make sure data is kept up to date. And so that's something they're now addressing, but I think shows how if you go about it the wrong way, you can very easily get into trouble. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, I promise I come to you.
Thanks. David Bowen, Great Ormond Street Hospital. I've been coming to these events for a while now, and about a year ago, I mean, one of the themes was about where the action is in terms of cloud, and the graph showed there's a lot going on in infrastructure as a service, a lot going on in software as a service, but not much in the platform area in between. The message is now seem to be that everything's booming, but it seems to be in the same places, so platform as a service, I just don't hear much mention of it in terms of the tools that I myself am interested in, things like business process execution, service bus, complex event processing, business rules, real-time business intelligence. And that was highlighted a bit by the, was it Simon, the Microsoft chap who sat in your seat, saying, well, yes, you can bolt all these things together through SDKs. And I think, well, okay, that sounds a little bit like, back to the bad old days, if you like. And, sorry, Andrew. The point you made about the failure was, well, they didn't integrate things properly. Well, you've got to think about integration when you do this. But the bit that's missing, that seems to me, is that these middleware, middle-tier tool sets, BPM, et cetera, they just don't seem to be emerging as cloud topics. Now, is this is it because I'm bypassing this forum? Is it I just don't have my ears to the ground? So is my perception right? And if so, is this going to change? Any thoughts on that?
Okay, should we go to our platform providers, Google and Microsoft?
I'll kick off. It's I think it's in terms of maturity. I think we've seen a lot of people looking at software as a service moving from early adopters to now kind of early majority. I think people candidly have started where they know they can get economic benefit and actually get some business value, and that tends to be at the layers where they know the per cost on the unit. So software as a service is probably an easier target. And I think platform as a service is a maturing technology space as well. Yeah, there's Force.com, there's App Engine, there's Azure. There are technologies there. I think what we see from Google is that people start with SaaS and then they'll use platform as a service to potentially rewrite applications, again, over those that maybe were hosted internally. And examples could be a ton of applications that may sit within Notes that they may want to put into the cloud, redevelop that on PaaS. So we most definitely see PaaS supporting software as a service, and I think we're probably about to go into quite a prolonged period where platform as a service now actually has its own category. But I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think people have been waiting to prove that it actually can work within their IT estate. And they use the SaaS almost as that little framework to go and prove it. So I think it's quite an exciting space for us.
We are doing projects like that right now, but I think what's happened is that a lot of organizations have been through a sort of a step back, pause, re-examination of IT strategy, and are coming to realize that they can use platform as a service as a means to resolve the problems that they've got. So a couple of examples we're working on, people are using the cloud as almost a safe harbor. So, global organizations, disparate IT, localized provisioning of IT, which has left them with a legacy of heritage applications and databases, and much as has just been described, things like Notes and so forth. And so centralization of IT to drive through the benefits of the cloud and to, if you like, meet the challenges of the current economic situation is something people are seeing as attractive. So they're using the cloud, using Azure in our instance, but equally could be others for precisely that purpose. But I do think we're at a fairly early stage in that, and that there's a lot more to come.
I think what you've hit on is that platform as a service is the hardest one to justify why you're doing it. If I take what we see from our environment, infrastructure as a service, fantastic driver for it is that the CFO, CIO comes down to the IT department and says, right, you guys have got no CapEx budget this year, you've only got an OpEx budget, work it out. That drives infrastructure as a service immediately. It's an easy one. Software as a service tends to be driven by the departments that are using it. So, sales departments going, hey, we're using this Salesforce.com thing, we think it's really good, it helps us do our job. So it's being driven by the departments that want to use the functionality. Platform as a service, to me, is the sort of the last battleground of the somewhat poor systems admin who's sitting in a room saying, I desperately want to keep control for, your point earlier on, for data protection, for compliance, for understanding governance. I've got to have some level of control. I've had to give up IaaS, and I've been forced to give SaaS. I'll hang on to PaaS. I think once the software vendors start seeing different ways of writing software applications to take advantage of the cloud, that will be when PaaS really kicks off.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to bring it to a close now. I'm getting the nod here from Emma. That's been a really good discussion, and I think you'll all join me in thanking the panelists for their open and honest answers.